Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's collection for All-Party Parliamentary Group on Blockchain. And my name is Martin Docherty-Hughes, calling, as I say, from banks of Loch Lomond, in my own constituency of Western Bartonshire. I can see the view behind me, which is looks like high summer, even though we're still in spring. That's not a live picture, I have to say. Can I welcome, first of all, our guests this evening who are going to be speaking. We'll have our first session, then followed by our second session, and then a final Q&A. Can I also thank all our members of the All-Party Parliamentary Group who are able to join us this evening, and from both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And what I'm going to ask, if any speakers, make sure you mute your device if you're not speaking, and then we'll be taking, as I say, the Q&A at the end. We'll take it from there. Can I just first of all ask Dr. Birgitte Andersen to say a few words before we progress?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Birgitte Andersen. I'm the CEO of the Big Innovation Center, and we are the Secretariat for all this all-party parliamentary group since its beginning 2-3 years back. This is an extraordinary extra meeting we'll be put on tonight that was organized just 2 weeks back. So we've been very agile in responding to the global health crisis. We clearly believe we also got happy for this extraordinary panel we have actually collected today with the global shakers and leaders in making decisions around this here. Clearly this is also extraordinary times. But we believe that blockchain is a very key factor in this here because of its ability in terms of traceability and mobility of identity records. And that's particularly important, of course, in the health system, in the care system, in the people system, the transport system, and all these systems are very important with the data and identity records. Also, when it comes to the governance of all this around the blockchain, we really also can see here major opportunities using blockchain, whether that is a centrally governed system or whether it's more like democratic system. So we think that blockchain has a lot to respond to help in solving the crisis. And we will hear tonight clearly from the panelists. Also, what I want to say is that the all-party parliamentary group of blockchain has been extraordinarily agile in general. We have been the first one to put up webinars here, and also in the crisis. And we were also a few years back the first one to record all our meetings, so you can go back in history and see our full historical record of all this. What we also do, we try to align the technological or the economic and social challenges with the technological opportunities of blockchain, and of course align that with policy and regulation, corporate responses, research, and the citizen participation is very important. So this is something that's very dear to our hearts. Finally, I also want to say that because of the big changes, our program has changed as well. And if you go on the website, you can see not only we are online, but we have also changed the program to be responding to the changes we're all facing. And we are clearly happy. There's one advantage moving online, that you're not constrained about the overpacked committee rooms in Parliament. Here you can actually spread out and have hundreds of people participating. So we look forward till tonight. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Birgitte, and it's good to see you down in London. Hope you're keeping well. And we're going to progress this evening because I know we will be all keen aware of the time. It's in different time zones from Toronto to Tallinn this evening. And I'm going to, first of all, introduce, can I just first of all thank all the team at the Big Innovation Centre who have brought this all together. Sial, Desiree and Fernando, and of course Birgitte, and just to thank them and for the record. Can I first of all welcome Angela Martin Waltista, who is part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Digital Transformation in the Spanish government, and also one of the Spanish representatives in the European Blockchain Partnership, EBP, in the policy and technical groups. Can I ask Angel to introduce us to what we're calling the use case of digital identity on blockchain, a European Union perspective, and he's calling us this evening from Madrid.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to address this meeting, and I'm honored to speak to this institution. I work at Spain's General Secretariat for the Digital Administration, which is part of the new Ministry of Economic Affairs and Digital Transformation, and the public organization in charge of digital transformation for the central government. In short, we design and deploy digital services for citizens and public administrations. We are participating in national and international forums related to blockchain, such as the European Blockchain Partnership, that is collaborating towards building the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, the EPSI. In that consortium, I'm the Spanish representative in both the policy group and the technical group to coordinate the EPSI deployment. At the start of 2019, we began on the design of the EPSI. 3 use cases were chosen to be the first one deployed: self-sovereign identity, diplomas, and the notarization of documents. All 3 use cases met 3 consistent criteria. They are based on a need clearly identified by the public authorities. They possess a cross-border dimension, and they are use cases in which blockchain technology offers added value. In February 2020, the first test version of the EPSI network applied to those cases was launched. During the past several months, evidence has emerged that the self-sovereign identity use case is not an ordinary use case, and that this was not at the same level as the others. Identity is the foundation upon which all other use cases are based. Sometimes it is necessary to confirm beyond any shadow of a doubt who the individual associated with any credential is. Moreover, all other digital credentials are an identity attribute of an individual. This use case, in combination with the eIDAS regulation, allows a cross-border identification based on blockchain, where each country may use their national identification means in an easy way with high level of assurance. The self-sovereign identity model results in enhanced data security. I will mention only 4 points. Personal data is held by the individual citizen and not in information silos. The consequence is a population that is more protected from traceability or user profiling analysis, as well as from manipulation and the big brother effect. This system does not prevent service providers from accessing the personal data of their users and customers, but it does establish a way for the individual to give or withhold his consent, linked to a specific purpose, as well as a way to withdraw that consent. 2, data is more secure against computer attacks or hacking, because personal data is not housed in a single system, but in many. In addition, if one of the nodes is attacked, the others immediately detect the change, thus facilitating early attack detection, one of the hallmarks of an enhanced security system. That's possible because of the consensus algorithm to reach an agreement between the parties about the information to be registered in the ledger. The cryptographic elements around blockchain also reinforce the security of the information. Moreover, the elliptic curve type of algorithm using blockchain is more robust than traditional cryptographic algorithms. 3, enhanced transparency minimizes institutional corruption. This effect is derived from the greater difficulty implied to manipulate or alter information. For example, in Spain, there is a blockchain tender project that guarantees that no one can access the content of the offers before submitting them. In addition, the transparency of this process has a leverage effect on the market. Participatory and legislative processes become more secure and transparent with blockchain technology as well. Regarding the question of whether self-sovereign identity on blockchain helps in the fight against the COVID-19 and other global pandemics, there are many applications of blockchain technology in the self-sovereign identity model that are appearing in the health sector, such as registering vaccination certificates or medical prescriptions, the possession and control of medical records by the individual, health insurance cards on the blockchain, control of pharmaceuticals, and writing into a blockchain network the registry of the infected people for study and analysis of the expansion of the infectious disease. All these examples are digital credentials that in a self-sovereign identity model are under the control of the individual, which means increased privacy, improved interoperability without a central database, and could work in a cross-border dimension. And finally, from my point of view, some of the main ingredients for success with this technology are training and education. Also, collaboration and agreement are needed between all parties. And finally, awareness that blockchain will not substitute all the efficient centralized models that we are using now, but in some cases it will. We have to be able to recognize those uses that are best suited for blockchain technology. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And direct from Madrid, we're going to head to Estonia, and I think to Taavi Rõivas, who is a member of the Estonian Parliament, former Prime Minister of the Estonian Republic. Welcome him this evening. And I do know that there's a keen eye from Edinburgh as well this evening. Our honorary Estonian consul will be watching this evening to make sure that you and I are both on our best behaviour, and who's been promoting today's event. And I think it goes without saying that Estonia is a leading light in the digitization of the state. So, sir, good evening, and over to you.
Well, first of all, if you allow me, just a very short introduction to Estonia. Estonia became independent again in the early 90s, in 1991. And why is that important? It is we needed to build a country including all the details of a country, institutions, information systems. We needed to build it from the scratch. So basically, we didn't have any legacy, and we needed to introduce the best technology that was around. And of course, 90s was also the time when internet became a thing, and thus it was very logical to build a very digital country from the beginning on. Most important cornerstone, before I will come to the blockchain, of course, most important cornerstone and difference from many other countries that Estonia has is that already from the beginning of this century, we started using digital identity and digital signature. This means basically that every single Estonian has to have a digital ID. You can have a passport, but this is optional. But digital ID you must have. So every Estonian has digital ID. I know that in 2020, it's not so much of a rocket science anymore, and many countries actually have their own versions of digital identity. But perhaps it's interesting to know that more than half of all the digital signatures in the world are still today given by Estonians. And if you wonder how many of us are around there, it's only like 1.3 million. So either the rest of the world is not signing enough, or we are just signing like crazy. So go figure which one is correct. Now, taking everything digital by default has given us the opportunity to not only save paper, this is also relatively useful, but of course it has given us the chance to save a lot of time and make things a lot more efficient. Let me just give you a couple of examples. When an Estonian declares taxes, it takes you usually less than 2 minutes, because all the companies have already declared the income of all the people. So basically what is happening in the background is that the system knows already how much money each and every citizen made. And you as a citizen, you just need to go and have a look if everything is there. And if you, let's say, made some income from another country, and this is not linked to the Estonian system, or Estonian tax authority doesn't already know about that, you just need to add it manually. But other than that, basically you go through with 5 clicks and confirm that everything is correct. And that's all you need to declare your income. The same applies to the most important thing today, your health. Ever since 2008, all the medical data of each and every Estonian is in one central system. It's called e-health. It's of course digital. And this means that if an Estonian living in Tallinn, which is the capital and my hometown, is taken to hospital in Tartu, which is the second biggest town, a university town 200 kilometers south, the doctors, with your consent, of course, or if you're unconscious, then the consent is basically not asked, of course, but the doctors in Tartu can get your full medical record, and this helps a lot because they know a lot about you. They don't need to rerun all the tests and so forth. And now we are coming to the main topic today and how blockchain has helped us. Many of these important information systems is safeguarded by blockchain in this way that we keep the data intact. If you build any digital information system, especially a government one, especially a public one, you need to make sure that the data is not, attacked in any way. So it's extremely important that the data integrity is in place, and blockchain is something that we have been using, basically from before that it was called blockchain. The first information system in Estonia to use it was succession registry, and that was already in 2008. Obviously, it wasn't called blockchain back then. It was called hash-linked timestamping, but it's very, very close to the technology that we are calling blockchain today. And of all the registers, I can just mention a few that are using blockchain to safeguard the data: healthcare registry, property registry, business registry, succession registry, that was the first, digital court system, surveillance and tracking information system, state gazette, which is the official laws and regulations, and also official state announcements. Now, obviously, you might ask that, what about data privacy? And it's a very important question because blockchain, as we know, cannot or should not be used if you store data there. You cannot make it fully private. So basically, what we have done is we don't store all the data in blockchain, but only certain hashes, so that it is enough to make sure that the data is not meddled with, but it doesn't give out any of the data itself. These kind of things are especially important when we are talking about health, for example. I know that we are on a very straight time limit, so with that, I end my introductory remarks, and I would be very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And I think you're actually ahead of your time. So, it's always the first time I think I've ever seen a parliamentarian who finishes before their allotted time, especially in the parliament that I sit in. So thank you very much with that. Then we're going to head on to Geoffrey Goodell, who is a senior research associate, University College London, and a keen advocate and supporter of the parliamentary group. And he will remind us about, especially around human rights and human-orientated security. So, sir, it's over to you.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate this. First of all, I want to say that there are many potential ways to use blockchain and distributed ledger technologies to benefit national security, for avoidance of doubt. For example, we can use distributed ledgers to trace the provenance of the component parts of the many products that we use every day, including the food we eat and the devices we use and more. In this manner, the product components can be tracked and traced, and we can even use this information in marketplaces for the purpose of levying tariffs, recalling products, informing consumers, and monitoring business practices. We can also use DLT to track other things as well beyond physical goods. software updates, targeted adverts, campaign finance, all of which are absolutely relevant to national security. And in each case, the solution can be designed to be human-oriented security, which is to say it can be designed to empower individuals and businesses to make informed decisions about their security, thus benefiting society as a whole. But we must be careful with the topic of tracking humans themselves. And I see that some of my fellow panelists are experts on digital identity. And when it comes to individual persons, digital identity is an area wherein we need to think very carefully about human rights before we design and implement systems, because the systems will have a profound effect on the power relationships individuals have with businesses, institutions, and governments. Many digital identity systems work by giving every person a number and expecting that these persons will use that number again and again in different contexts, thus creating a permanent record of all of their activities. But the people are not the enemy. If we believe that the people are the enemy, then we've lost the plot. We must first ask, cui bono? Who benefits from the design and implementation of digital identity systems? In general, we can argue that many beneficiaries are large corporations or state actors who believe they can reduce their risk by knowing how individuals behave, or increasingly by controlling and constraining how individuals behave through record keeping, incentives, and punishments. Recently, there has been a burgeoning fascination with self-sovereign identity systems in which individuals are able to use different identifiers in different contexts to try to address this. Now, the self-sovereign identity approach might seem to solve the problem of individuals being assigned numbers. However, it turns out that the expectations do not square with the reality, and we must not fall prey to this siren song. Nearly all of the so-called self-sovereign identity systems rely upon a master or root identity or some other mechanism to ensure that all of the credentials that a person might create are linked to a single unitary avatar. Some of these systems, such as Showcard and Everest, accomplish this explicitly, using biometrics, for example, to bind all of the credentials that an individual might create to a single root identity that cannot change. While others, such as Uport or Chainspace, accomplish this implicitly by providing cryptographic means of proving that two credentials are linked and thus ensuring that the relying parties will always ask for that link. And unfortunately, it turns out that if a link between two attributes or credentials can be proven, then it can be forcibly discovered. It is the requirement of this unitary avatar, which is to say the requirement that each person can have only one root identity, that influences and constrains how individuals can behave. If we want to preserve the freedoms that individuals enjoy in the real world without changing the balance of power, then we need to ensure that they have a means to create multiple unlinkable identities. I call this the inalienable right to alienable identities. For avoidance of doubt, it is technically possible to design digital credential systems to allow everyone to have multiple unlinkable identities. But in the quest for high assurance, such designs have mostly been ignored. More assurance is not always better. And in fact, the greater the assurance is needed for a particular use case for a digital identity system, the more narrow and limited that use case must be. Make no mistake that, by and large, digital identity systems represent a shift in power from the vulnerable, who will be punished for unclean records, to the powerful, who will be able to exploit their need to be accepted in society. There must not be one ID to rule them all, and we will not succeed as a society if we force people to submit to having all of their actions be discoverable and linkable. Such a system would not be national security. In fact, it would introduce insecurity for those who need security the most. Thank you.
Well, can I say, Jeff, you usually speak my language and you say everything I want to say, but are not articulate enough to do. It sets some real clear challenges for those of us who are interested in the role of identity in blockchain and its benefits, specifically in identity in liberal democracies. I think we all need to be very much aware of that. With that, we're going to move straight ahead, and it's a privilege to welcome Don Tapscott, who's joining us live from the lakes north of Toronto. Got a lot of family in that part of the world and a lot of Scots in Canada, Don. So all over to you, and I think we've got quite a lot of folk online to hear what you've got to say tonight.
Hey, thanks so much. It's a real delight to participate in this important conversation. And governments are obviously quite central. to us moving forward. You know, the old Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, best government is no government. I think being a libertarian is sort of maybe an unpopular thing these days, as people understand that the state is actually important. Anyway, I co-founded the Blockchain Research Institute, and I've been at this whole digital thing a long time, dating back to the 1970s when I was at Canada's Bell Labs, Bell Northern Research. And if you look at the what's going on today, I think this is one of those rare turning points in history, that this pandemic will bring about profound changes to our economy, our behavior, our society. And, you know, some leaders that failed the challenge will be replaced. Many institutions will be scrutinized, hopefully changed for the better. And I think that apropos to this conversation, that the pandemic has also revealed some very deep problems in our systems for innovation, identity, commerce, data, and our entire technology infrastructure. And it's got a lot to do with data or lack of it, obviously. Clinicians, epidemiologists, government authorities have been working in the dark, and there's been virtually no testing in the early weeks of the outbreak in most Western countries. Supply chains have proven inadequate, failing to respond to the need to produce something as simple as a paper mask. And consumers lacking transparency become fearful. They've hoarded basic staples. And so there's a big question on the table, too, actually. How can such situations be avoided in the future? But right now, immediately, what can blockchain be used to help us move forward? So we have a big program right now on blockchain and public health, and a focus on blockchain and pandemics. And yesterday we published this report. It's a very significant document, 25,000 words. And I wanted to just, I'm not going to go through it with you today unless you have a few hours, but I would like to just sort of set up the framework for the conversation, if I could. This report is available publicly now. First of all, the way that we view this technology, it's not some interesting new thing. It's really at the heart of the second era of the digital age, where insofar as, you know, machine learning and the Internet of Things and all this other exciting technology that's coming on board is going to be pertinent to our economies, our governments, our society, it will need a transactional platform. And to me, blockchain is at the heart of that. Now, this is the framework that we're using to think about this so far. And a number of the topics have been raised in this very thoughtful conversation. Let's begin up at the top with supply chains. Now, this is a $50 trillion industry, and blockchains can help a lot. In fact, I think that in many ways, over time, blockchain will become the foundation of supply chains. And you think about all the challenges that we're having right now, getting medical equipment, and also the challenges of hoarding and so on. And we've got this ragtag, dismembered set of supply chains in the world, where you got trains and boats and planes and trucks and bills of lading and you know, escrow agents and intermediaries and various kinds of payment systems and borders and immigration people and tax authorities, and a lot of this is moving around with EDI, these traditional primitive supply chain technologies with traditional ERP and with paper and faxes and phones. Imagine if we had a shared network state for supply chain, you know, a real-time view of the whole asset chain, really, of digital assets as they flow through all of this. And digital assets representing physical assets, of course. That we could have a single version of the truth. We could have micro payments. We could have real-time supply chain. We could have transparency. No one's going to buy 3 years of toilet paper if they know that there's a supply chain that's going to deliver toilet paper tomorrow or very soon. And so this is basically an enormous opportunity. The second, and it's been the focus of this conversation so far, is about health data. And, you know, if you think about data today, this is obviously a very big problem. We are strong advocates of the notion of a self-sovereign health record as a subset of a self-sovereign identity. And I believe that we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have all of the benefits of a self-sovereign identity, which are all this data, the virtual you that you generate as you go throughout life, that represents your identity, that can be available to you to plan your life, which it isn't right now. It's captured by these large digital conglomerates and others that use that data and exploit it. Secondly, you could monetize the data with appropriate assurances. Thirdly, it could be secure. Right now, your identity is out there running on all these centralized servers, which are hackable. There are two kinds of these servers, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked, pretty much. And fourth, we could protect our privacy. People say to me, you know, Davos this year, some guy said, Don, privacy's dead, get over it. If you got nothing to hide. I think this is stupidity. Privacy is the foundation of freedom, and all this data represents our identity, so we need to get it back. So imagine a scenario whereby we have a self-sovereign identity healthcare record. It's sweeping up all this data from your digital devices, from various tests and measurements which are taken. That could include stuff like your real-time heart rate, your temperature, and so on. And by law, governments could mandate, say in a crisis, that citizens make anonymized data about clinical information like your body temperature, location, or wherever for aggregate tracking and predictive analyses. Citizens could instruct their digital identity to provide pertinent health information to any registered clinician should they need it. For example, if you're hospitalized, citizens may decide to withhold some information, such as a fracture from an accident a couple of years ago, or a psychiatric problem or something. But a smart contract managing their identity would release all the information that would help with their treatment. Thirdly, we could have incentive systems that could reward us for making our private data available to appropriate clinicians and even government planners, even with identifiers attached, if we felt that that was appropriate. Personally, lots of us would be happy to reveal our medical information about, say, our body temperature, or a dry cough for that matter, or a positive test for coronavirus to authorities to help manage the problem in our communities. But we could also have all kinds of other intrinsic blockchain-based incentive systems, and that's a big topic we've explored. And then all of these data would represent the entire population, not some weird partial sample, which could be misleading. And never before in history have clinicians, epidemiologists, authorities had such extraordinary access to such a wealth of data. And using a next generation of data analytics and AI, they could understand possible trajectories of a virus, take steps to crush it in the egg, just like never before. And five, as individuals recover and develop a verifiable immunity, they could receive what MIT Sandy Pentland calls a health certification to attach to their digital identity to prove that they're safe to work publicly again. This is the age-old conflict between the needs and rights of an individual and the needs and rights to a society. And I thought the conversation by Geoffrey Goodell was quite thoughtful, but to me, the issues that he raised don't fall in the category. It's one of two boxes: reasons why this is a bad idea, or implementation challenges. And those are all implementation challenges in my mind. Now, I'm not going to spend so much time on all these others, but identity, and I agree completely with Angel Luis from Spain, that this is the foundational issue, really, upon which many, many other blockchain applications center. All kinds of opportunities for incentives for change, by creating a blockchain, tokenized carbon credits. I'm involved in a company called CarbonX.ca. It's trying to change the behavior of billions of people through incentive systems that encourage green behavior. We could have a rapid response system for medical professionals, frontline professionals, and the heroes, of course, are the heroes right now. But hospitals can't onboard them fast enough. There's a lack of talent, not in the sense that there's a lack of talent, but just an inability to find them. And we could build a whole new a system, streamlining coordination for talent among different geographies, having certification for medical personnel, helping us deal with all the border challenges, all the convoluted criteria checks and redundancies in the certification process. And again, this is blockchain is about verification, about accuracy, about provenance, and so on. And finally, a really big one for us has to do with sustaining the economy. That the impact of this thing is unfathomable economically. In Canada, where I am, I'm sitting up here at my cabin in the woods, a few hours north of Toronto, with an extended family. 2 weeks ago, the unemployment rate in Canada was 5%. Today, it's almost 20%. And there are entire industries that, sure, you could argue it's conjunctural and it's all going to come back, but a lot of it isn't. Personal travel, entertainment, anybody planning a cruise, and even for business travel, there's going to be a PTSD for a long time that's going to prevent us from wanting to rush off to some other continent for that meeting. In Canada, I think the oil and gas industry is finished. The whole base of the Canadian economy for our history really, is kind of done. So there'll be all these big structural changes, and you combine that with all this other stuff from technology, autonomous vehicles, like the main job type in 48 of 50 states in the United States is truck driver. I think that's not gone in a decade, or in 50 years, it's gone in a decade. So, setting aside that we are going to need a new social contract, and that ideas like a guaranteed a universal basic income are ideas whose maybe their time has come. We need to take a whole bunch of steps to build a new kind of innovation economy. And we write in this research a bunch of ideas on how that occurs, and how we could help fund entrepreneurship. And a really big one is we need to move to digital cash, and not just community-based cash like Bitcoin or corporate-based cash like Libra, but fiat currencies. Every country should have one. And then I think Mark Carney's right when he mused that they should all be rolled up to a global synthetic hegemonic cryptocurrency. And insurance and risk management has been mishandled at many levels, and there are all kinds of ways to protect people and businesses from catastrophic risk. And then we have all these new decentralized models of governance, organization, and problem solving that can reduce the costs in healthcare delivery and help NGOs and others raise funds. Individual donors contribute money and other resources to fight against COVID and so on. So, and then not to mention all the big changes to the financial system, reducing counterparty risk. That's what almost brought down the capitalism in 2008. And so there are a whole cluster of opportunities that have to do with the financial system and with money and things related to that. So I'll just close by saying that governments are important, and in our work we document hundreds, for sure, many dozens of actual companies that are working on this. But just some things for government to close. Governments need to wake up. to blockchain. You know, it's not about AI or machine learning or the Internet of Things or any of the rest of that. These are all users of data. They're great, wonderful technologies, but it's all about the data itself, about creating a secure transactional platform for our economy. And every national government needs to create an emergency task force on medical data to start planning and implementing blockchain initiatives. They can stimulate the development of technology firms working on the solutions that we talk about through all kinds of ways. One of them is governments can be a model user of the technology. Governments can focus on the supply side for market data, not just the demand side. It means passing legislation to mobilize stakeholders around creating self-sovereign identities and citizen-owned health records. They should pilot blockchain incentive systems for motivating people and having them behave responsibly. Government should partner with medical professional associations and other players to implement blockchain-based credentialed systems. Governments are the world's largest supply chains. They should be using this technology for their own supply chains, piloting cases. Central banks should move quickly and swiftly to create fiat digital currencies in their country. And the IMF should take a leadership role in rolling these up. So those are just some of the things that we talk about. The report is available now. Just go to blockchainresearchinstitute.org. This conversation so far has been enormously interesting, and I welcome a collaboration from many of you with us on the work that we're doing.
Thank you very much, Don. I got to admit, as a politician who is definitely not a libertarian, I was wondering where you were going to go with that opening quote, but you certainly saved the day. And as one of the co-founders and also the executive chair of the Blockchain Research Institute Toronto, we're glad that you were able to join us today. And of course, it is the Canadian Parliament and the Canadian Senate, which I think was also the first ever parliamentary report into distributed ledger technology and blockchain, which of course can be accessed by the Canadian Parliament website. We are going to head straight on to the next speaker, and that is Marta Piekarska-Geater, who I believe Marta is in London. And Marta is a director of ecosystems at Hyperledger and brings the latest developments of blockchain applications to support the fight against COVID-19 on the Hyperledger platform. Marta, over to you.
Yes, I am muted. Welcome everybody, and thank you for putting this together. As Don has said, it's so far very interesting. I'm going to give you a quick overview of Hyperledger for those of you who don't know it. I'll mention a couple of projects that are currently happening, but actually both Andy and Jonathan, who will be speaking after me, will be talking about projects built on top of Hyperledger technology. So I'll leave loads of space to them because it's really their show. So let's start with this, if I only can, oh, here we go. So Hyperledger is a Linux Foundation project, and Linux Foundation has been created over 20 years ago to promote and to provide governance and infrastructure for open source projects. It started with core Linux, and today it grew to over 120 different projects in every major industry. We have projects like cloud native computing, LF Energy, a project that recently started to see how can open source technologies, also with the use of blockchain, support fighting climate changes and providing sustainable energy sources, and all sort of others. What we want to do is we want to create the largest shared technology investment in history. We believe that together we can create something much more stronger than individually and in siloed companies. 4 years ago, we created Hyperledger. Hyperledger was created by 30 different enterprises that came to the Linux Foundation and said, let's see what happens in this blockchain space. How can the distributed ledger technology that underlies Bitcoin can contribute to enterprises, to what we do on day-to-day basis? This turned out to be a very good idea, and we've grown over the years to a very big project, one of the fastest growing projects within the Linux Foundation. And Hyperledger has become an open source collaborative effort to advance cross-industry blockchain technologies. It is hosted by the Linux Foundation, and it really spans across all sorts of domains. And we have a very modular approach to host software projects. We like to call it the greenhouse, because anybody can come with a seed of their idea and plant it into the community. And if the community wants to feed the plant and help it grow, then it will grow to something beautiful. And as you can see, we have 14 different projects. The ones that are probably most interesting for this community here, given the scope of COVID, is Hyperledger Indy, which are tools and libraries and reusable components to provide digital identities rooted on a blockchain. We don't believe that blockchain will solve all the problems, but we do believe that there is a space and need for decentralized, autonomous identity, self-sovereign identity, one that is where data belongs to the user or to the humans or to the devices, rather than centrally controlled authority. And Indy is that independent identity. It is a special purpose-built blockchain. It uses a Byzantine consensus instead of proof of work, which radically reduces the cost and improves the throughput. But there is no constitution. It's bring your own. And I know Andy will be able to tell you much more about it. Some of the very interesting projects that are being built on Indy, not directly with respect to COVID. I thought that, in terms of COVID, the projects are just being built out and are not well tested. So I wanted to tell you a bit more about things that are already, being used and the parallels to the world that we have today. So the first one is iRespond, which created a special system that allows you to protect electronic records of patients in the case of sensitive diseases like HIV. And out of almost 9,000 patients that were tested on it, almost 100%, 99.86, agreed to register under iRespond, which is unheard of acceptance of HIV testing, especially in Africa. And here you can think of the same thing, what happens when we need to test people for COVID or not. Another one is PrivateKit. It comes out of MIT. It's a app that allows you to trace the interactions with people that you have if you get diagnosed with a disease that is contagious. And this also allows you to do it in a privacy preserving and security way, and kind of looks at the traces rather than precise location. And finally, Ledger Domain has built a pharmaceutical supply chain. And why I'm talking about it? Because I want to talk about what happens tomorrow when we have that drug, when we have that vaccine. How will we be able to prevent fraud, to prevent scarcity that would be created in an artificial way, to make sure that the COVID drugs and any other pandemic drugs are, raised in value or are much more costly. So I've ran slightly over time, but I started late. So with that, I'll leave you and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Marta. And again, we'll be taking the Q&A at the end. And can I now just call on Andrew Tobin, who's coming live from the beautiful Isle of Skye in Scotland. He's a director of EMEA, the Identity Ecosystems and the Personal Information Economy is poised for massive change. And he's going to be talking about how digitally prove things about yourself quickly, securely, and privately. So it's off to the northwest to the Isle of Skye. Andrew.
Yes, thanks very much, Martin, indeed. I work for a company called Evernym, and If I get my slides to advance, there we go. So we're a US-based tech company. We're the originators of much of the technology that Marta described, Hyperledger, Indy, and others in this new world, new generation of digital identity and trust, being called self-sovereign identity or decentralized identity. Let's look quickly at the implications of COVID-19. First of all, we think that there's going to be a massive increase in the need for trust at a distance. So, for example, doctors doing consultations remotely. How do you know it's a doctor? How does a doctor know it's the right patient? You're also going to need to have, or you're going to see a very rapid increase in the need to prove who you are digitally, quickly and easily. We already have that need, but COVID and all of the implications of remote working and remote contact are going to really catalyze that increase. Also, it's not going to be good enough to have something that works in one country or in the EU. You're going to need something that works globally, globally acceptable, and is interoperable globally. And as Geoffrey Goodell said, something that doesn't harm privacy and doesn't result in lots of unintended correlation and also increases security. So we talk about really credentials. We need digital versions of the credentials we all have that are globally interoperable and verifiable anywhere. And we call them digital verifiable credentials. And it's not just about identity. These are also credentials, the things you see on the screen here. Credentials could be anything that convey a certification, an entitlement, or an achievement. And they all need to work online as well. So let me give you some examples of what's happening in the world at the moment. Marta gave you some other projects. Here's one that is directly pertinent. Trusted digital identity and single sign-on for medical staff. Solving the problem of a doctor taking a day or more to get authorized to work at a hospital that they've just arrived at to do a specific job or to respond to an emergency. Getting that day or more to get them onboarded down to 15, 20 seconds. Back in just at the end of last year, we ran a successful pilot with the NHS and NHSX and a UK company called True, CEO of which was meant to be speaking here, Dr. Manreet Nijjar. He is an infectious diseases consultant running COVID response in North East London, which is why he can't be here at the moment. And it proved that by issuing digital credentials to doctors about their GMC certification, license to practice, their medical degree and so on, they could onboard into a new hospital in seconds and not days. And once they've done that, they could also use their digital credentials to log into hospital systems without needing usernames or passwords either. There is work ongoing at the moment with the NHS. As you can imagine, I can't speak any more about that. That would be for the NHS to do. But I think you can see the potential there. Other things happening in the world of digital credentials. There is a global COVID-19 credentials initiative that has been kicked off. The first call had 150 people from 60 organizations around the world looking at how can you take this new technology of digitally verifiable credentials and use them globally for specifically COVID-19 responses. So for example, have you received a test? What were the test results? Have you had the disease? What were the results? Are you okay to fly, etc.? Again, the focus is on global interoperability whilst enhancing the privacy and security of the individual and not creating a huge global centralized database that tracks everything you do. These are the building blocks. Evernym is very proud to have created Hyperledger Indy and Aries and Ursa and contributed a lot to the open standards. And this is a real focus here. You can't go down a route that is proprietary to a single organization. You have to have something that is based on open standards and open source. We use a global utility for storing public keys of credential issuers. And the one we use is Sovereign, which is a running blockchain, if you like, an instance of Hyperledger Indy. And then the fourth component you need is the ability to actually issue and verify digital credentials. You need platforms to do that. This is an open competitive environment. We have one out there already that is being used. There are other organizations that do as well that are built on the same open source technology. So the summary, what's special and what's new? Firstly, anyone can issue a digital credential about anything to anyone else, just like you can issue a piece of paper, a passport, a letter, whatever it may be. Anyone in the world can verify the origin, authenticity, and integrity of any digital credential. The same capability can be used for secure authentication and communication. And every interaction is private, secure, and encrypted by default. And this can be achieved without needing a huge privacy-busting central database, and without all parties needing to have expensive technical integrations with each other, which is why digital identity doesn't work very well at the moment. So that's me. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. And we're going to skip just like that from the Isle of Skye straight over to San Francisco. Welcome Jonathan Levi, who's the CEO of HACERA and the Unbounded Network, and Mipasa. He's recently focused on Mipasa, a brand new blockchain tool to collaborate in the fight of COVID-19, sharing data, and is going to give us an update on a way to gather reliable, quality data and make it easily accessible. I think it's a good morning to Jonathan from a good evening over here in the west coast of Scotland.
So, hello everybody. My name is Jonathan Levi. Yeah, I'm the CEO of HACERA. Thanks for the intro. Oh, it started working again. I just wanted to share a screen. So this is Mipasa. We basically started working on a democratized data platform, which should serve as a basis for COVID-19 and more than that, related trusted tools, analytics, and applications. And let's talk about kind of what we did. By the way, how much time do I have? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
No, you have a wee bit shorter than that. Let me just see.
Exactly.
Sorry, you want to see that again, Fernando?
6 minutes.
6 minutes.
Six.
Counting.
6 minutes.
6 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot. Okay. What's the idea, right? And many people here talked before about the limitations of blockchain technology, and I think it's really important to understand that blockchain is not going to solve everything, but it can solve a few things. So because I've been kind of working on blockchain for many, many years, I was working on Bitcoin before Ethereum was even launched. I was the chief product officer of Miro, which basically the company that created the Lightning Network back in the day, and then started working with Ethereum, and then later on Hyperledger Fabric. And at the end, I was like the guy that designed the identity of Fabric and moved on, left IBM research to create HACERA. We partnered with the rest of the ecosystem, was the release manager of Hyperledger Fabric 1.0. So we've been doing a lot of stuff for many, many years in blockchain. And when we saw this crisis, the first thing I wanted to try to find is a way to do it without the blockchain, because I thought it's going to be like better. But this kind of a solution actually lend itself to a very easy mechanism where what we wanted to do is to just collect a lot of publicly available data at phase 1 and to try to look at data sets that are published by the World Health Organization and ECDC and different countries and local authorities. And we just wanted to focus on 3 things. First is how about we try to make sure that the integrity is there, meaning that when I refer to a file, it's very clear that I refer to the latest version that the WHO published as of that date, and this is the actual structure. The second thing that we wanted to kind of ascertain is there's some security in terms of nobody's tampering with the data on the fly or in storage. And third thing, I didn't want to create like another honeypot where, you know, we store everything in one location and we actually take away privacy by allowing different data sets that don't have PII on their own to basically triangulate, and other people can take advantage of that. And people mentioned privacy a few times here, and I think that the biggest problem that we have with privacy, especially in a crisis mode, in an emergency government, or, you know, in any jurisdiction, people forget one thing. And I've been working with zero knowledge proofs before it was even cool, and I've been doing stuff with privacy, you know, identity mixer all the way to ZK Snacks, before it was even kind of, we had the first production version actually of zero-knowledge proof in enterprise kind of settings. But the reason why I care so much about that problem, and the reason why I think we were able to gather, like, I don't know, a consortium at the level of the Fellowship of the Ring, is people have to remember that this kind of temporary crisis is something that if we don't manage correctly, once this data is out about my age, about my past history, about, I don't know, any sensitivities that I have, whatever it is, you cannot opt out of these databases. It's just out there forever. This is why I think that we need to be very careful. And the main goal here was actually to provide government, institutions, you know, anyone that was kind of involved with making decisions, to start making informed decisions. And that's also including employers, you know, businesses, regulators. There are so many people that we need to get data, and it just scattered everywhere, right? So we do have a lot of scattered data, and you can somehow kind of gather it. And we saw a lot of hackathons really working hard to spend a lot of time to try to like build some models and tools, etc., etc. And some of them have like really beautiful charts, but they break it after 2 days, okay? Because the API is not there. Somebody added a column, somebody renamed, and we actually feel, so I was a banker too for like 10 years, and the last thing I wanted to do as a mathematician, as a cryptographer, as somebody that builds systems, is actually to play with market data. That's the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to do all the cool stuff. But actually, looking at the data and trying to build a taxonomy of, you know, we just gathered like a ton of data. We have on mipasa.org a call for kind of data warriors. We want people to submit more data to us because we analyze it, and we have like a team of like a lot of universities, research people, institutions that would like to help and contribute. So we have like one data from one end and analysis from another. And the idea is actually to take this opportunity where people are actually listening and working together. We get like top cloud providers, technologies, big techs, all working together. And basically what we do is engineer the data in a way that doesn't change it. We prepare the data so that we can consume it in an easy way. So for example, the WHO and the, I don't know, ECDC, for example, they don't refer to countries in the same way. Why don't we use ISO? And then to basically not to get us to kind of write all the analytics, but to actually integrate with external analytics. So if Don said that blockchain is not about AI and machine learning, that's true. But I would still like to have one version that we're looking at a single version of the truth, and that should be the source for all these heuristics, you know, all this analysis that we're going to run. And we actually provide people with something that we call like a, you know, an API freeze. So even if there are structural changes, we still provide some data, for example, about what population from WeBank. So we can, it's very easy to go to like World Bank, get the data set, consume it, this federated AI, and they know that if they go through our system, you know, it didn't get tampered, it's version, and they can easily consume it, and it will stay like that for a while. So that's basically the project. I didn't prepare like fancy stuff. We have like amazing partners involved. I encourage anyone here, if you want to learn more or hear more, just go to mipasa.org and join us. I'm pretty available, even though I'm pretty busy. We have a ton of partners coming in. Intel is involved now. We have Splunk. We have so many people helping everywhere around the stack. And we're looking for more data, more people that would like the data, and anything in between. Any questions? I'm here to answer. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you very much for that. And we're going to go straight into the Q&A, and I'm going to ask some members of the advisory board to pose the first questions now.
Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much thank you, Martin, for giving me the Q&A for us to start with. I have a few remarks before I sort of put my question. Louis, Jeff, Andy, thank you very much for the deep relation between IT and health. That was extremely interesting. And Dan, privacy is the foundation of freedom, and government need to wake up to blockchain. Well, this is an understatement. Another thing is I'm worried of the impact of COVID-19 on democracy. crises are golden opportunities for would-be dictators, and Mr. Viktor Orban has been given reinforced, or did I hear wrong, permanent powers, while saying that he was now building non-libertarian state, and no doubt, and this will be happy news for you. Now, my original question was, do we know of a single use case of blockchain to deal with COVID-19? But Jonathan has told us that there is at least one. And first question is, do we have other use cases of blockchain to do with COVID-19? And if Jonathan, I'm sorry, but I didn't quite catch what about the Mipasa, project. What is the purpose? What is the ultimate aim of using blockchain, with COVID-19? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Is it a sort of global ledger? And if so, why? And why did so many companies like Microsoft, IBM, Oracle join? I would be interested to know more about this.
Oh, with pleasure. So we're using blockchain for integrity, so that we can all look at the data coming in, and then we look at the data coming out, and we make sure that nobody has tampered with the data. So we can easily compare the version that World Health Organization basically published against the version that you can consume. And we have enough parties there, so it's not going to be just HACERA or just IBM or just Microsoft, just Oracle, or any single party will be like the bottleneck of all of it. But we do want to gather enough information. They just scattered around, and think about, it's a very similar problem that we used to have when we had distributed systems with different, update frequency. So I don't know, I was a banker, so Hong Kong has that thing, and then the market closes, then London continues, and then London closes, and then New York continues. And basically you just move data around the world. At some point you need to kind of put them all on a timeline so that you run the end of day risk. It's a very similar system that we have in global banking. We're just trying to use all this technology that we built for financial systems to, I don't know, I would call it like better use. So we're using it for integrity, versioning, and making sure that the data is tamper-proof. One thing to say, by the way, we are not guaranteeing that the data that the World Health Organization publishing is correct. I can't count the number of, people under like POIs or number of confirmed cases. What we can do, though, if we have one data set that is referring to confirmed cases as positive, and another data set that is referring to confirmed cases as sick, and other data set, just call it like, I don't know, confirmed cases, we can actually do the work once and have enough people that will actually vet that this is the process to compare apples to apples. Otherwise, we are just wasting like a ton of, brain power in all these hackathons, because everybody is spending the first, and I go to hackathons all the time, you spend like half a day just, structuring the data, and the next day is the same problem.
Jonathan, we're going to have to ask you to wind up because we're quite kind of tight for time, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. If I answer, that's okay.
That's great. Thank you. And if we haven't got all the answers to everybody's questions tonight, I'm just very conscious that we are against the clock here this evening, and we're going to go next on to the open Q&A. So bear with me one moment to go through some of those. So if you're first one is from Gary Nuttall. We're going to go for one question rather than two, given the time frame. Yesterday's Bank of England event to discuss central bank digital currencies mentioned the prospect of having a programmable money through the use of smart contracts. What are the ethical considerations of this, forcing people to have a digital identity in order to participate in a 21st century digital money? I hope we'll get, if Geoffrey's still on the line, maybe he might want to in on that.
Yes, I'd like to just point out that, and I'm happy to take this, just wanted to point out that it is entirely possible to design digital currency systems that do not rely upon digital identity systems. And it is entirely possible to design digital currency systems to be either central bank digital currency or CBDC, or digital currency that's issued by the government and backed by either treasury assets or state assets. So there are a number of options in this space. And in all cases, it is possible to design a system that actually has private wallets that allows people to unlink the sender and the recipient of individual transactions, while still allowing a regulated financial intermediary or money services business to be on at least one of the ends of the transaction. And I would argue that a design that has that property of unlinking the counterparties from each other is absolutely essential if we want to deliver on the degree of privacy that people enjoy with cash or with payments in general. And this is something that is achievable, although it hasn't gotten as much attention as it should. And you'll be hearing more about this in the months ahead.
Thank you, Jeff. And sorry, Gary, I'm going to have to go on to the next bit. We will try and get the answer to the second part of your question sent to you. This is from David Birch, and it's to Angel, to Taavi and myself, to explain why using a blockchain makes sense, since blockchains are designed to prevent untrusted nodes from changing the transaction record. But in Spain, the systems, just trying to read this, but in the Spanish system, who are those untrusted nodes? Angel, you want to come in there?
Yeah, okay. Well, in the model we are working in the EPC, citizens has their own digital wallet, a place where they can store their personal data in the form of a digital credential. So they control their identities because they store them and they manage its use. That digital credentials normally are signed from those who can attest that information, a government, a driver or vehicle agency, a university, my friend, etc. So they have a level of assurance depending on who signed that credential. The user is central to the administration of its identity. He can transport that identity across multiple locations, giving his consent to its use by third parties when it's required to do so. And this is fundamental for a specific purpose. And they can withdraw that consent. So companies will have only the information they need to provide a specific service. For instance, being over 18 without giving it any other information, neither the birth date. The EPC is a public and permission network. Public refers to the users of the blockchain. The EPC aims to be open to public bodies, citizens, and enterprises. This compares to private blockchains with limit access to a control and limit set of users only. Permissions refer to the requirement for an identity, authorization, and access, according to an access control policy, to be able to perform an action on the blockchain. In this regard, to be an EPC node, you have to be a recognized public institution of the European Blockchain Partnership. So that institution, typically the government, can deploy an EPC node. For instance, in the use case diploma, the information about diplomas will be injected by those that now has the authority in any country, normally universities. In Spain, it's the Ministry of Universities, the place where are stored all official diplomas. So in the future, it will be possible for a citizen to ask that ministry or an university to use his diploma in the form of a digital credential. And that will be a digital attribute of the identity of the citizen stored into his wallet or under his control. And this is also linked to that reflection about the single source of truth. Of course, it is needed a consensus about who is going to be the node to write the next block and about the validations of the information to be written into the ledger. But at the same time, the truth remains in the same place as it is today. That institution which sign the information that is injected into the blockchain, universities, okay, governments, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if Taavi maybe wants to say anything from an Estonian perspective on that.
Well, just to make it clear, we don't use blockchain for digital ID. The digital ID was founded already in the beginning of the century, and there is a central authenticator that is semi-private, semi-public. It's built together with the banks and telcos, and it works very well. It's very secure, much more secure than just printing your document on paper or plastic. But having said that, you know, probably in the year 2020, when we would do our digital ID from scratch, we might do something differently. And in principle, you could easily do it also using separate nodes to make sure that that the information is accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much to you. I'm just very conscious of time, and I know there are other outstanding questions, but I do think we will need to try and do some type of rounding up. And I'm just wondering, before I ask Birgitte to come in, if I could maybe ask some of our speakers, notably Don and also Taavi, maybe just to say a few final words to our participants and to the all-party parliamentary group, if that's at all possible. Don, can I ask you first if you want to maybe just say a few final words?
Sure. Great conversation. I thought I knew everybody in this space. I obviously don't. So it's really great to connect with all of you. And my main hope is that we can continue this conversation. I don't think technology solves problems at all. Actually, people solve problems. But when you think about the first era of the internet, 40 years, it did many wonderful things, but it was an internet of information. It enabled a fragmentation of public discourse, undermined our privacy. Our data was captured by digital conglomerates that was at the heart of a bifurcation of wealth in society. There have been many, many other problems. The creators of content suffered because it broke our intellectual property regime. We didn't have an internet of value, so people took assets, like say a song, and they just published them and copied them. Well, now we have an internet of value, and it's not going to me, solve any problems, but it does give us another kick at the can to rewrite the economic power grid and the old order of things, and to address many, many burning issues. There is no more immediate burning issue than this crisis.
Thank you, Don, and thank you for joining us from just north of Toronto. And can I ask Taavi if you maybe want to say a few words as well? Be much appreciated.
Well, thank you very much, and it has been a very interesting meeting indeed. And as this particular meeting shows, we are going more digital, and I think the terrible disease, the terrible virus, is actually helping us to move digital faster. I don't know how often you organized Zoom meetings before, but the Estonian Parliament went much more digital in terms of this kind of meetings. I have had lots of meetings with different colleagues that I would have otherwise flew to meet. So this is one very important thing. And that will also, now coming to blockchain, that will also set a new need, or even more important need, for cybersecurity. And this is one of the aspects where blockchain can help as well. Now, what I don't understand is how the rest of the world still can give signatures with this very retro tool, because many of you I see for the first time, and I'm quite sure that I haven't seen anyone's handwritten signature. So you haven't seen my handwritten signature as well. But if you happen to have receive a contract from me tomorrow that somebody has scribbled there something that might or might not resemble my name, you kind of assume that this was from me. Or the same is basically, if it has Boris Johnson written there, you assume that this is from the Prime Minister. Whereas I would argue that having a proper digital signature, which is just a line of ones and zeros, but can be verified either in distributed way or centralized way, it will be much, much more trustworthy than just a scribble. And I do hope that the world is moving in this direction. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for participating tonight. I'm sure you'll be extremely busy, and thank you for joining us. Birgitte, just maybe over to you before I finally wind up for tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. Clearly, we can have continued questions and answers, and we have also our big audience we could keep taking them from. What I think we really struck home today was this whole issue of blockchain for government. Because it's very important how blockchain can come together to kind of to create this. Well, it's almost like a super state, as we talked about today, and the global governance and the citizen participation and the decentralization of all this. And these are some areas that we really tried to move fast on. And I don't want to repeat lots of the comments said here, but there's so much to be done there. And what we will continue doing in the all-party parliamentary group and also at the big innovation center is to look at this blockchain for government in both health, in sport, for climate change and other areas. And we really would welcome to keep working with the evidence givers here, institutions, but also anyone else who has been listening in and who wants to participate. And then we can take the conversation and the project offline and then meet again. Thank you. Thank you, Martin, as well.
Thank you very much indeed. And can I just say, in terms of the issue around national security, as a member of the Defence Select Committee in the UK Parliament, I think there's a growing awareness of how the importance of how you secure logistics, supply chains, and that's not just in terms of military supply chains, it's about health in terms of a national crisis, it's about data sharing. There's an issue specifically here in Scotland where you traditionally, for example, registered deaths in paper, only 5 days a week. That's now moving to 7. But you also have the NHS where in Scotland where the doctor already does it automatically. So there's all this confusion, duplication at a time of national crisis, and it does throw up as all challenges in this. Taavi also said that in terms of parliamentary processes, Estonia are way ahead of us in terms of those structures. I know that the UK Parliament will be looking to meet virtually after the Easter recess, and hopefully the Prime Minister, getting well, will be participating in Prime Minister's questions. And I know here tomorrow in Scotland and Holyrood, the First Minister will have the first digital First Minister's questions in the Scottish Parliament, which I'm sure will be similar across the other nations of the UK and across the world. Just to say to everybody, thank you very much for participating. To everyone at the Big Innovation Centre, thank you for organising. To our speakers from San Francisco, to Tallinn, to Toronto, to London and Madrid. Thank you very much indeed, and we will hopefully join you soon back here on Zoom. So thank you and good night and stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night and good luck.
Bye-bye.